Without further ado, I'd love to get started. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around to our our panelists and let them introduce themselves. Before that, I am Sonia. I'm the founder and CEO of Orbis 86, where our mission is to onboard people through Web3. And I, along with Kirthiga, your event host, and a huge shout out to Hedera and ServiceNow for sponsoring the event.
Whoa.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to go the traditional route of ladies first. Maybe Kirthiga, you can introduce, followed by Asad, and then we go.
Well, awesome. Well, excited to be here. I'm Kirthiga Reddy. I am a builder turned investor, gone right back into building. So was the first employee for Facebook in India and their managing director for India, South Asia. Had the fortune of working very closely with Asad, where we literally saw the next billion users onboard onto Web2. And very, very excited now to, after a pre-stint in investing, 3 years stint with investing with SoftBank, now back to building as the CEO and co-founder of Virtualness. We are an end-to-end mobile-first platform that allows creators, brands, sports, media to design digital goods using generative AI, mint on the blockchain, associate it with rewards like tickets, private videos, and be able to sell them to fans using credit cards. So all of the benefits of blockchain enabling monetization, deeper connect with community without the complexity of blockchain, and very, very excited to be launching in a few weeks.
Thank you, Kirthiga. Kirthiga raised a successful round of $8 million plus from the lead investor was Blockchain Ventures, but we also had Polygon Labs and a lot of other investors invest in. I'm pretty sure she'll talk about those. With that, I'm going to go to Asad, who is the co-founder, CEO of Petero Labs. Go on.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm the CEO of Petero Labs, which is focused on helping creators build communities which are empowered both economically and socially. Before starting this, I started this in October. I was at Facebook for 10 years. I was the VP of product engineering for monetization, for creator monetization, marketplace, and some of the other products over there.
Welcome, Asad. And Asad is building in stealth, so I'll let him uncover his details. With that, I'm going to go to Charles. Charles is the co-founder CEO of NFCO, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, excited to be here. Sorry I'm late. Okay. So I'm Charles Daniels, CEO of NFCO. I've had a long career in finance, Wall Street, also in infrastructure tech. But now I've launched two companies. NFCO is launching 2 projects. One is Carfax real estate. Take properties, make them into an NFT, and that platform reports everything that happens after that. So not only from end users, but also platform partners like people, Lowe's, insurance companies, to create it. So a holistic picture of what is happening with the property. We're also launching an Islamic finance company, a lending company called Kanavel, which allows Muslims the ability to lend to each other with loan terms and have payback, and have actually a lot of donations. So 2 companies simultaneously, it's a lot of fun. Have an answer after that.
Thanks, Charles. Charles also leads a lot of events for Crypto Monday. So if you find events at Ruby's or happening at Hannah House, that's most likely going to be Charles. And let's go to Alan. And Alan is building Enya Labs. So Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Sonia. Hi, everyone. I'm Alan Chu, co-founder and CEO of Enya Labs. We launched Polar Network a year and a half ago to address some of the scalability challenges in the blockchain space, and specifically computational scalability and also interoperability between the blockchain world and the quote-unquote real world enterprise data stores, the Web2 services. And my background, I come from an engineering background in distributed systems. I was an early engineer and product manager at a couple of distributed system startups that one went public and one got acquired. Spent a few years in venture, but similar to Kirthiga, felt the calling to go back to building. So here I am, and building Enya Labs for past several years. Look forward to sharing some of the lessons learned with all of you.
Thank you, Alan. With Enya Labs, Alan is building a platform which has core focus on interoperability, and I think that's going to be key in terms of driving mass adoption. So with that, and without wasting any more time with me speaking, let me actually go to all of the founders, and this one question I want each one of you to take a go at it. The question is, can you please share some of your initial fundraising journey and insights with all founders and the attendees in the room? Who wants to go first?
Well,
Alan.
yeah, I'll jump in and share a couple of lessons. One thing I think we did well was we started with identifying individual investors who were already excited about what we're doing. They're already in our circle. They're following our journey. And as we started thinking about how to crystallize a Series A for the project, and we reached out to them first, and they were already excited to get involved. And it didn't really matter how much capital they were putting in. What mattered most was they were committed and they were willing to put in the time and effort to help and open up their network, right? And we focused on them first before we officially started fundraising. It was important to have these individuals who are committed and truly believe in what we're doing and in our vision. So that when we then actually started to talk to the broader ecosystem of investors and supporters, we could refer to them and they would be vouching for us. So that was really critical in creating early momentum for the round. And speaking of momentum, having momentum going into a round is extremely important. I just can't stress that enough. You don't want your round to drag out. Your deal is either hot or not. There's no in between. So do as much groundwork up front as possible to create excitement, right? Which means starting with folks who are already bought in, and then have them introduce you to others who might be interested as well. And don't go into these conversations with the goal of and mindset of fundraising, but just getting them excited about the vision, getting them building conviction. And then once you sense that critical mass of interest, that's when you kick off your round with the goal of closing it as quickly as you can, talking about several weeks as quickly as you can. Don't let it drag out.
Thank you, Alan. So as Alan said, it is important that you find your early believers, bring them on board as soon as possible so they can stick with you and also vouch for you before you start any kind of fundraising. And then, as Alan said, don't drag on it. So Kirthiga.
Yeah, Alan, actually, you reminded me of my first 6 months of just testing the concept and the idea. And, we started with talking to creators. And as we were talking to creators, several of them said, if you start this company, we want to invest in this company. So that was like first sign one, that this is valuable enough that people are not only giving us input, but also want to put in a check, right? And then, so there was a whole process of just formalizing the idea. And I'll tell you, my first pitch deck to even my fifth pitch deck was so night and day different, with the input we were getting. And so by the time I actually started formally fundraising, we had a target of raising 5 million. I already knew where that 5 million was going to come from, and we ended up being, quite oversubscribed, which we don't take for granted, especially given the market. We have a very, very nice mix of creators like Murina Mogulko, the Silicon Valley girl, Randy Zuckerberg. If you're not already subscribe to them, please like, subscribe, follow. These are amazing creators, like the creators you'll see right after us in the next panel. We were also very thoughtful in terms of the composition of having a very strong mix of Web3 creators. So Blockchain led the round along with investors like Polygon, and also working out the right mix of Web2 creators who had seen that wave before, and people like F7 and Oceans Ventures came in. So there was just thinking very carefully. And diversity was also a key element in, a strong belief that diverse cap table and diverse team leads to stronger results. So we paid specific attention to making sure we have a diverse cap table.
So one of the key learnings from this, right? For Kirthiga, the creators were actually the consumers of the platform, and they liked the idea so much that they turned into investors. So that's something, that is a great validation of what you're building is going to work out. With that, I'm going to go to Asad.
Yeah, so I think our fundraising path was maybe slightly different. So at Facebook, I was leading a lot of the creators and creator monetization area, and had built a lot of the products which had already paid out a few $1 billion to creators. And then there were some spaces that we wanted to explore more. So when I decided to leave Facebook and connected with a few people who were in the space, they were like, "This is reasonable. There is a good track record of actually building and shipping products for creators." So that kickstarted the whole journey in some sense. And then I think like very very similar to what Kirthiga said, I think like we wanted a good mix of people who are builders, and people who are builders in Web2 and Web3. So we have folks like Balaji and so on from the Web3 side, Listen Labs from the Web3 side of the world, and then folks like PG or Aditya and some of these who had actually like built big products like Facebook, Run, Instacart now. And then of course I think we connected with A16Z, which definitely is one of the top ones for crypto. So and their policy team to their creator team to their product teams, like they were really good. So that's how it does.
From all the conversations so far, including what Asad said, I think that initial part that goes into fundraising is very important. Because again, for Kirthiga, again, Alan, right, Asad, what was important was bringing in that lead investor, right, A16Z for you with this blockchain ventures, and again, reaching out and leading it into the people that you worked with, early believers, right, people who will vouch for you, who will stand with you. So, Charles, let's hear from you. What are your insights?
On my side, I think the first thing I would say is, as you're going on in your fundraising journey, do not talk about Web3. Right? And because I think for a lot of people, they don't know what that means. And I would say, the second thing I'd like to say is, VCs are not the end all be all of money. Right? So if you put this, illustrate this point, if your crazy neighbor who tie-dyed his pool wanted to give you $5 million, take it. Right? Because at the end of the day, sometimes I think we overcomplicate the process of fundraising. And if you've got to make it so specific that people can't understand it, you're going to have a hard time explaining to some people money too, right? So last, I would say, as you're going through this journey, as much as you're trying to find people to write you checks, try to find partners too, because a lot of when you're looking at building what you're building, you may realize as you look at your journey that you may not have to build that partner, which is money you can save to build towards whatever your actual value prop is. So that's what I'd say.
Now, Alan, I have a question for you, right? Both you and Charles, you guys actually used token warrants or you raised money through tokenomics, through SAFTs. My question for you is, SAFT isn't a typical part of the traditional venture capital raises. How did you use token sales to raise money for Enya Labs?
So just a point of clarification, the token round was done for Mobile Network, which has its own governance foundation. And so the fundraise was done through a token round for the foundation, and Enya Lab's role was really as a primary co-contributor to the project. And the token that serves a number of purposes in the project, in addition to being governance token, it's also a gas fee token, and it also is used for a core piece of technology that's unique to mobile network called hybrid compute, which allows smart contracts to make any on-chain API calls atomically within a smart contract transaction. So the token plays a role in enabling that as well. So that token round was done between the foundation and a broad community of supporters who really saw the potential in enabling interoperability between the blockchain world and the existing legacy world. And so they wanted to be part of the movement of building out this network so that blockchain applications can actually connect to use cases that are relevant to the day-to-day lives of typical individuals. You don't need to be a crypto native to be able to enjoy the benefit of a permissionless financial economic ecosystem.
So for us, we use tokens in two specific ways. One, I created the token network in parallel almost to our company, right? Because we're a prop tech company. One of the biggest things about token economics is the adoptability. If you're creating a token, how do other ecosystem partners use and transact in that? So I use that token, those tokens, actually my early fundraising round with friends, family, angels, because it provides them liquidity faster than a safe. So the equity, the ability to get, it's more attractive, especially when you're earlier rounds or you haven't really launched your MVP or even your MVP at MVP stage. It's a little bit easier for people to understand how they can get out of the investment versus when you bring in your A round, the bigger round, where they know they're locked in for 5 to 7 years. So I found it very, very useful in courting and talking to early stage investors who could maybe understand the bigger ecosystem advantage of what I was pitching, even if they didn't maybe fully understand it, or I didn't fully understand it, the actual value prop of the product I was building. let me pivot a little bit.
I'm just going to do a quick follow-up question because typically in the venture cap world, we know that investments take 5 to 7 years to get your gains back. In SAFT, the cliff, the vesting periods, those are different. So if you could just take 30 seconds to explain what is that time difference?
So time difference, if you have like a SAP, for example, let's say, hypothetically speaking, you have a game company and you wanted to have tokens so you could buy extra lives, right? As you launch your game, as you launch your token economy, you're looking at potentially 18 to 36 months to get that off the ground and launch, 36 months for the outside, knowing that there's also a big treasury behind it. There's other partners who are going to adopt it, use it, play with it. So the upside for your early investors, you might have tokens that start at $1 and go to 4, 5, 6, whatever it is, because those economics are driven only by you, as opposed to as you get into your round, sometimes the valuation of the company is completely out of your hand, right? So again, 18 months probably at the earliest, but it allows a lot of those investors to say, how do I either hold on to this and convert it to equity, which is like a token warrant, or how do I maybe dump it into an exchange or electronic exchange that value for different investment.
Or some of them could use it for market making as well, right? Now with that, Kirthiga, you touched upon diversity, right? The question to you is, how important is that cap table composition as you approach investors?
Yeah, I think, so I'll answer that. And, the one thought that was going on in my mind as you were talking about tokens is that, the one profession that is really happy with all of this is, and I was talking to some of the legal representation in this room, our legal fees in our monthly burn hurts us. But yes, there's a lot of legal advice because there's no cookie cutter approach. This is really charting new waters, and there's so much regulation and or conversation and changes that you really want to be sure that you have the right advice and the right expert advice. So that's just one other factor to factor in when you're building the company. So diversity is like super important when building the cap table and it's diversity across a bunch of dimensions, whether it is gender diversity to diversity of thought. Even before we were fundraising, for example, we created a very strong advisory board. I have Jim Lauderbach, whom you're going to hear from shortly, who is somewhere here, former CEO of VidCon, and the person who runs, the creator economy, shows newsletters. So again, like, subscribe, follow. But really, diversity of thought, diversity of gender, diversity of experiences, diversity of age groups. I had someone who came up to me and said, I heard you're raising, this is, I've saved 25,000, and I want to put it all into this company. I'm like, I don't think you should. I mean, startups have their risks. So, you might want to buy a house, you might want to do so many other things. He says, no, I'm convinced in the future of this new digital world and where blockchain is going and where creator economy is growing. And finally, his parents had to intervene to say no to me, to say, please accept this check. But it's just that kind of diversity of across dimensions that was super important, and it was a very deliberate effort to get the kind of diversity that we do, and I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you, Kirthiga. I think that, when we're looking at diversity, we have to think about diversity from the top to bottom and from bottom to top, right? Diversity at every level is important because, again, I generally take this example when companies say, hey, we have a lot of blacks or Latinos working at our place. If they are all working as janitorial staff, that isn't enough diversity, right? You have them even sitting at your boards. Now, with that, a question that I have for you is, when it comes to selling the value proposition, right? I think Alan also touched upon it when he said, and Alan and Charles, right? Don't lead with Web3. The value proposition is important. So how do you communicate the value proposition to users or investors so they buy into the idea and they support you?
Yeah, I think like this is probably one of the top things that I think every company that's in Web3, like, don't lead with Web3, as Charles said, is top of mind, which is like how do we get the next, like, the whole economy around Web3 is built on the TAM is going to be huge and every user is going to be a part of it and it's open and it's permissionless. But the fact is that today the TAM is actually not that high. So the question is, how does the new products which are coming in add more users to the whole ecosystem, which then lifts all of the things, whether you're building a platform, whether you're building a product. And in our case specifically, because we were not building a financial product or anything, like, our product is by definition content and social, I think like that's one of like the big thing was like how does this introduce Web3 to people in a way that that they don't even know about it or they understand it from a pure value proposition perspective. So like if I'm a creator, if you talk to creators, the biggest thing that they talk about is like what do I get to own after I have worked hundreds and hundreds of hours on all the platforms that exist. So I think like that resonates, which is like what can ownership look like in an environment where actually most of the value goes to the platforms. So that resonates, but it's a little bit less to do with like, hey, how do you implement it, whether blockchain supports it or not, but the fact that they want clear ownership of their audiences, their follow graphs, the interoperability between different platforms, and that makes sense. I think for the consumers, it's like, okay, what do I get out of this? Which is like, sure, I mean, like there could be some tokenomics or so on, but I think like over financialization actually, to be honest, is a little bit of a problem if you're building a social product. So there it is like, does it interoperate better with other products that I could use when I go to different platforms? So let's say I work really hard in Reddit, I'm a moderator, I earn all of those badges and so on. Then what happens when I go to Discord? Does that help me? Like I think like so users are thinking about those kind of questions, and then I think a lot of the product, how we were designing it, was to answer those questions. Of course, the whole ecosystem needs to be there so that it's valuable on its own when it's atomic, because definitely it's not connected to anything else. The second question is how does it increase the overall TAM for the market? Which is like, will this introduce Web3 for the first time to a user without them having to understand all the details? And I think like that was a big part of our overall pitch.
Maybe, Asad, I'll just ask you to continue and talk about the TAM. So, folks, a question for the audience members, right? Last year, how many active Web3 wallets do you think we had in the ecosystem? Active Web3 wallets. There are 8 billion people on planet Earth. How many active Web3 wallets did we have? A number. Anyone throw a number out? 100,000? That's just us in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
4 million? It was 87 million, give or take, right? You can go to Google and you can find the stats. 87 million, that's not even 0.5% of the total population of planet Earth, right? So we all here are really early, and we are talking about TAM, increasing the TAM. We haven't even reached out to 5% people on the entire planet. How do we get to those first billion users and go from there? With that, Asad, if you could just take 30 seconds to talk about what are some of the things you could do to get to that TAM?
Yeah, I think like you start from use cases that actually users already understand, and then say, if I add this to the mix, if I add this technology into the mix, how does that make their life better? So again, if you go to the creators, which is like, I think any company can say, hey, we'll give you more ownership or like clear ownership. Of course, like getting a mailing list from Substack, that's a form of ownership. But if you have to think about what does that really mean and how do you really prove it, I think like you can get a lot of credibility if you actually use the technology under the hood, which actually enables that. I mean, in some sense, when Substack is now offering creators to buy their stocks, I guess is one form of ownership. But it's kind of, if you have to think about it, how complicated and how primitive that whole thing is. So that's one example. And sometimes you like take a problem and say, is this 10x better or easier solved with this technology in some sense?
Kirthiga, you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's reminding me of the early days of Facebook India when we used to ask people, are you on the internet? They would say no. Are you on Facebook? They would say yes, right? Because they don't care about what's happening in between. They just care about connecting with their friends. And that is where a lot of our discussions, and this was a theme that came across very strongly even in the prep session, which is let's focus on what problem that we are solving and for who we are solving it. And there's so much friction now in the system. And so a big focus for all of us really here is how do we bring the benefits of Web3 without the complexity of Web3. And by the way, you add to that the technology shift that's happening with generative AI and AI overall. And really, these are massive tectonic shifts. So how do we make all of that accessible to creators, brands, sports media, and the different audiences that we serve is a big focus area.
Thank you, Kirthiga. And with that, I want to go to Alan, right? Because we're talking about building use cases for onboarding like 1 billion people, and you have a platform on which people build for those use cases, right? So can you shed some light on why interoperability of dApps is going to be crucial as we grow into the next 10 years, 20 years, and we think about longevity versus just short-term gains? And B, I would love your insights on what kind of dApps could and use cases could actually take us to, again, getting those first billion users onboarded onto Web3, whether or not they know that they are on Web3.
Thanks. I can agree with Kirthiga and Asan more here. It's really about addressing use cases that are really relevant to people. They couldn't care less about the underlying infrastructure. Now, our vision is to build that kind of infrastructure to enable developers to then go meet those needs and build those use cases. And the reason interoperability is important is because the reality is we all live in this physical world, in a non-blockchain world. A lot of the data originates in this part of the world, not on-chain. A lot of the verification of the authenticity of data also exists off-chain, not on-chain. So it's unrealistic to expect the entire world, every single transaction to be migrated to the blockchain world. And therefore, we have to find a way to build these bridges so that blockchain applications can tap into the off-chain sources of data and can leverage off-chain attestation services, for example. And then on top of that, blockchains are great. They create permissionless infrastructure, but there's a trade-off. The consensus inherent in the cost of achieving consensus is a performance hit to computation. There's no way we can run the latest AI models on chain. It's impossible, it's too expensive, too slow. So that's another reason why we firmly believe in the importance of building these interoperability bridges, such as hybrid compute, to enable developers to build blockchain applications that can tap into on-chain AI models. And I'll give you a very concrete example, right? With our technology, you can actually build a lending protocol that aggregates capital on chain. And then this lending protocol can invoke an off-chain AI-trained underwriting model to assess risk, to decide whether a loan should be approved or not. And then based on that decision, the lending protocol can release capital.
That's a great example, Alan. So, one of the things we often talk about is, hey, not everything has to be built on Web3, right? A lot of applications we look at, they're just building Web2 use cases on Web3. That might not necessarily be the way to go. In fact, the next 10 to 20 years, we are going to see hybrid applications being built, where the permissionless part of it, the consensus, the part that gets audited, that's being built on blockchain. But then you have bridges, oracles connecting you to the off-chain infrastructure, where, again, as Alan said, you're talking about computational heavy resources. Blockchain might not have it, and you could build those bridges.
Well, an analogy that I think all of us can relate to is the relationship between your mobile phone and cloud. Right? Mobile is great, you've got compute and storage with you everywhere you go. But if we couldn't connect to the cloud, then there's very little it can do for you, right? There's very little. But once it's connected to the cloud, boom, that's where magic happens. So it's not either or, it's both and.
And just talking about it, right, Charles, you obviously pivoted on your idea. When you started building, you had a certain thought in mind, and then you built out based on the use cases you were looking at. So that's, again, something that I would love to talk to you about. Onboarding a million users, value proposition, how did those things impact your journey of building the product that you finally launched?
I think for us, like the analogy there of cloud versus cell phone, right? If you look at a lot of real estate data, most of it's off-chain, most of it's off-cloud, right? So we had to say, as we really looked at blockchain, I think it's really important when you build to be honest about how much does this technology help and enhance your offering, and how much does it hold it back? Because if you build too far on blockchain, to your point, it can be expensive, it can be slow. I was talking to like a senior vice president of Visa who can't run Visa on blockchain. It's not fast enough.
Two questions and then close.
Right, so but there are parts they would want to have on it. So as we built out for real estate, we looked at it and said, there's a lot of things, trustless nature that makes sense, things you want to know that are immutable. A record hasn't changed.
Because it might come up in the questions that we
financial
told.
insurance,
So,
or maybe title even. You want to know that hasn't changed, that hasn't moved since you last owned it, or since you want to look at it, right? Those things make sense on blockchain. We look at other pieces of transactions. Inventory, somebody buys a fridge. Somebody buys an appliance and wants to put it in their house, and that's going to move. So there's some pieces that make sense more in a traditional cloud architecture, Web2 architecture, and some pieces that make sense in Web3. And we had to sort of look at each workflow, each use case, and decide where in the line should those pieces be, And because we did a lot of that work, our investors also just, this makes sense. We understand how this technology is going to grow and scale with you instead of hinder you at some point in the future.
So one of the big pivots, or one of the use cases that Charles looked at was, I think we have all been hearing about titles on blockchain, right? But when you go to an FCO, what people see is it's not just the title, but technically the appraised value of a house is dependent on all the additions that are done, how well you have maintained it, and by maintaining all of those records on blockchain, you're just making all of that information more valuable. When tomorrow you try to sell that property, it's not just, hey, we have a deed on blockchain, so it belongs to me, but it also has a record of everything, all the changes that.
Or even if you're a renter, right, on a property, there's more renters than buyers, but, I've been a renter. Raise your hand if you ever rented a place. But as you rent, you want to know, what am I renting? What does this owner maintain it? Did the last person get murdered here? So, you want to know these things, right? So we are also minting and looking at that kind of data as well. So it's not just homeowners, it's people who live somewhere. And we want to know the story of the homes.
No more haunted houses being rented out. Okay. With that, we're going to go to the audience for 2 questions. We don't have a lot of time for questions, so we take 2 questions from the audience, and then we will wrap up the session. So anyone has a question they want to ask? All right, I'm going to go to Tony.
I wonder if the founders can share with us when did they raise their last round?
So Tony is asking, when did you raise your last round? And I think that also feeds into the fact that the investment scenario has changed now, right? So what would that investment scenario look like right now for someone who's raising now? Who wants to take that question?
Well, we raised our last round in Q4 2021. So different environment definitely.
We raised ours now, actually. We're closing it as we speak.
So we raised our round in Q4 of 2022, which was a different scenario from Q1 of 2022. This was, again, I think our announcement was the day after the FTX crash. So that was when we.
Yeah, we were also Q4 22.
So folks, especially the current investment scenario, right? What challenges, what insights you have for people who are just starting their fundraising journey or who might start their fundraising journey in the next 6 months?
Yeah, do even more of the prep that we spoke about, factor in for longer fundraise timeframes, factor in to talk to a broader set of people. And as someone said, all of the investors, they'll always want to have conversations, but how many of them actually go and close? So just be mindful of those factors. And I think certainly as from operating a startup perspective, you always are frugal. You have to triple down on that frugality, that burn rate, the path to revenue, the visibility to even profitability, if you can. Those are all questions that are even more important in this environment.
Thanks, Kirthiga. I'm going to take one more question from the audience. If anyone has a question they want to ask, just raise your hand and I'll come to you. All right.
Hi, my name is Abby. A question for Charles. Actually, very interested in terms of understanding the Islamic lines. Do you have to build that in the platform itself, or do you approach solving the problem? You mentioned you focus on Islamic compliance, right? How do you solve that? Do you have to build it into the platform itself, or how do you approach solving that problem?
So for the Islamic finance piece, that's called CART. Look up CART.xyz. We looked at it from the point of actually Sharia law, and it's all in Quran, right? What are the rules around lending? What are the rules around riba? What are the rules for all these pieces? So we took a lot of those elements that came from Quran and then built them into a workflow. So if I was to lend you money or borrow money from you, how would that look? What do the rules say there? Because there's 1.9 billion Muslims and 900 million are unbanked. They don't understand riba. They think riba is haram, right? So we looked at it and said, hey, this is actually not true, and it holds all the community back because they can't participate in credit facilities, whatnot. But this is but yet everyone works with money. Everyone lends each other. So we built a workflow around this and also.
All right. With that, sorry about it, guys. The air conditioner seems to be working up. But with that being said, I'd like to wrap this up by going to each one of you and maybe just take 30 seconds to leave our audience with one key takeaway. Everyone in the room who's building, who is investing or building in the space, what's one key takeaway you want them to walk away with? And I'll just start with Asad here.
Yeah, I think I'll still reiterate. I think like the environments keep changing, so the proof of the pudding always is in building. Continue building, and I think the second one is focus on value. I think like ideology and all of those things are very interesting when everything is going up, but in the end, I think you need to connect it back to value. And if you show that something that you're building is 10x better, not 2x, not 3x, 10x better, I think it will always work out.
So the value proposition is key. Thanks, Asad.
Yeah, I love the 10x better, not 2x better. I think that's a key message there. I think the other thing that I would add is, while ChatGPT feels like an overnight success, they worked on it for 6 and 7 years before it became an overnight success. So, what is it that you focus on the building before it feels like an overnight success? And also make sure that you're leveraging the latest technology trends. So generative AI, for example, is a core part of how we are building out our solutions and only an accelerant. So leverage all of the newer trends as you deliver on your mission.
So look for the trends, right? And also as you're building out, make sure to work smarter, right? So if there are workflows, trends, things available, like LLMs available to make your life easier, use them, leverage them, and build with them. Alan?
Keep sharpening your vision. Keep your eyes and ears open for fellow travelers who believe in you. Take that feedback, keep iterating. People say you're always in fundraising mode. The way I interpret that is, internalize that is, you're always looking for people who support you, and they might end up directly investing in you or introduce you to investors. So you're always looking for true believers to travel with you together.
True believers, from start to end, that's exactly what Alan has been talking about, Charles.
I would say not be stubborn, have fortitude. I've only run companies for almost 15 years. The journey's going to go up, down, sideways, crazy things are going to happen. The pathway to your success is very much not going to go the way you think it's going to go. So I think it's really important to have belief in yourself, believe in what you're doing, keep your eye on that long-term vision, but be flexible enough to understand that the path can change and different people can have different ideas about how you get there.
So we are rephrasing, the one phrase that we have heard always, perseverance is the key to success. We're just going to rephrase it and say perseverance and pivoting is the key to success. And with that, guys, thank you everyone for listening to this panel.